All right. Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning. Good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. And of course, many more. Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome to Daring Dialogues Black Table Talk Edition. I am your host today, Shantae Charles, and we have with us some amazing, amazing people. I call them amazing human beings. Welcome to the platform, Mark and Mahia Gatskin.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Yes, my name is Mahea, and I'm here with my
Mahia,
husband, Mark.
thank you.
So you're welcome, and thank you for having us.
Yes. Thank you
Well,
so
I
much.
want to go ahead and introduce you all to our audience today. And we are talking today about education liberation and pathways to educational liberation and freedom. Mark and Mahia are the co founders of the Village Method, which is a nonprofit dedicated to transforming education through culturally responsive education, mentorship, and family engagement. With over 2 decades of experience, their work has impacted more than 1,500 students and families, creating community driven solutions that support Black youth in achieving academic and personal success. And so I am very, very thankful to have you all here with us today. I know that your schedules are busy. And so we want to get right down into the work. Tell us a little bit about the Village Method, your organization, and how did you get into this work?
Mahia, go ahead. I know she,
Okay.
she has a love story version, and I'm gonna let you go ahead and go with it.
Yeah, our work is really built on, like Mark said, the idea of how we were loved as kids, the love that we received from our family that transcended into us as growing up, where we wanted to recreate some of the things that we had for myself growing up with family in the Bay Area, Mark in with his family, also church life, having the idea of what a village looked like in our childhood. But then as we came into our adulthood, we had children of our own. We watched the children in our community, and we noticed that that proverb, it takes a village, it really does. But we wondered about the readiness of our village to actually do the work of supporting children. And Mark and I were a part of that question as well, as we watched things happen in our community that showed us we weren't as connected as we wanted to be when it came
Mhm.
to the youth in our church, when it came to our own children's needs. And so we wanted to do something about it. So 10 years ago, we left our careers and began the Village Method, where we create spaces that are welcoming, safe, and culturally affirming for youth, families in our community.
Wow. Wow, that is amazing. And considering what we have going on in our nation right now, um, and I'm specifically thinking about book banning.
Mm,
I am thinking about the new executive order, and we know that executive orders are not law, but they are sort of directives on how the nation should move. And
mhm.
so, of course, companies and schools are moving in that direction. Um, I think it's imperative that your organization exists. I think it's even more imperative now than maybe 10 years ago, with
Mm.
so many things on the line when it comes to education, when it comes to our history, not just, the banning of books,
Right.
the ways in which discipline is going to change in schools, especially this coming year, but also in the removal of historical things
Right.
in terms of our National Museum. My question to you all is, and either one of you can answer, or you can answer one at a time. Um, what issues do you see as far as, we know we have a gamut of them, but what two issues in education do you see right now, especially that you can put your eyes on and you can put your experiences to? What two issues in education do you see are most important right now? And how does that intersect with what you're doing with the village?
Mm. Let me say that we and the work that we're doing is a spiritual work. That
Mhm,
we are led by God. We are people of faith, and I'm just putting this in the beginning that we've been getting reminders of who we are as a people in this country for over 70 years, right? Since the passing
mhm,
of Brown versus the Board of Education and all that good stuff, we have never been satisfied with this public educational experience. We've
Mm.
never been happy with the outcomes that we have actually accomplished on our own. We've never been satisfied with that. There's always been a challenge, right?
mhm.
And
Yes.
so when we look at what happened during the over the pandemic,
Mhm,
spiritually, it almost seemed like, I'll just claim it and say that it seemed like God was trying to tell us, get ready. This is how you're going to get ready.
Mm.
Get
mhm,
back into your homes. Connect with
mhm,
the people that you're closest to, the folks that you trust. Be mindful and leery of breathing in the air of other people that you don't know and that don't come from your household, right? And so I say that to say one of the key things I believe is missing, and that's a challenge, is there is a lack of interdependence. We've seemingly lost um, the community feel. We've lost a dependence on us as a people. And this is Black Table Talk, so I'm speaking to our people, Black people,
yes.
right? What we
Yes.
have been able to build and what we've been able to accomplish as a people is phenomenal, right? But as you
Mhm,
look at the trajectory, we have moved from being creators and builders and doers as a people to being more so seemingly consumers.
mhm,
So we have moved into then being more dependent on the very system that seems to be thriving on our trauma, right?
mhm,
Um, I'll also say that, and sometimes, and forgive me, y'all, charge it to my head and not my heart if I don't articulate this the right way. Um, but when we were emancipated from slavery and sent off into this land was foreign to us. And so essentially, we were foreigners in a strange land, a very dangerous land. And here we go. What did we do within 20 years? We built successful townships, Black Wall Streets, communities, and hubs all over this country, not just
mhm,
in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but also in California, Allensworth. We built successful towns. We created schools and networks. There was a level of dependency and community that you see today in foreign communities, right?
mhm,
Chinatowns, the Japan towns, right? The folks that come from Afghan or India, they come together, they live and they create a hub. And what do? They excel in economics, in education. They seem to be doing well. What's going on with us is we have seemingly lost that sense of hunger, that sense of being foreigners. Mahaya can double tap on it if you want to, but it's the idea
mhm,
of being marooners. We're in a
mhm,
land and we have gotten comfortable, right? We've
mhm,
gotten comfortable with what we have. We are waiting to be served by a system that has no intention of truly serving us in what it was built to do. And I'll stop there.
So it's that sense of, what my elders would say, the illusion of inclusion.
Mm,
They my I grew up in a household where we were taught, and our liberation was communicated to us probably almost on a weekly, if not every other day basis. There
Hmm.
was there was elders whose feet that we sat at that would
Mm,
tell us about how they had it in America, what their inequities were, how they wanted us to move and do better than them. Um, I grew up in a space where children were seen and heard,
mm,
and as I get older, I'm finding out that that is very rare. To have been in an environment where I sat at a table with my aunts, my uncles, and they would talk politics and they would talk social issues, and they would turn to us and say, "Well, what do you think? What do you think about what's happening?" And so I've never really been in a space where I was told to be quiet and
mm,
not have a thought about what was happening. And I think that too plays a part into that home and community, because when
Right.
your children see you engage, when your children see you active in the community, when your children see you talking and having this open space and forum, and you're not sort of shielding your children from the very present dangers and reality, I think that too can affect their conscious mind about
Mhm.
how they need to move. Mahia?
Yeah. Part of what we've noticed, we call ourselves we're community builders, but I also feel like I'm a people watcher of where we're at and where we've been. So, and it sounds like you were too as a child, sitting at the feet of your aunts, your uncles, your grandparents. And as we watch, we are learning and observing. One of the things that I'm noticing is what happens to our communities
mm,
the 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 longer that we're outside of our community. And what I mean by that is when we are living in spaces where we're with our grandparents and uncles and aunts and lots of Black folk all around, and we have our cultural centers. But then, as we started through the Great Migration, especially moving outwards and outwards and outwards, and then into the suburbs, one of the things that we notice is how much what you just said is needed. How much of children knowing what is an elder? We literally hear that question in our after school program.
Mhm.
What is an ancestor? The idea of norms and not so much norms for the place of like holding people in a position, but more
Mhm.
when you said there's things that help you frame your thinking around our strengths, how we're going to get through. The idea of seeing the excellence in our children and our children seeing it in ourselves and our community, that comes from being together.
mm,
And
Mhm.
one of the things that we noticed as we watched our children and other people's children, and then ourselves as well, adults and those older than us, is that when we don't have space to gather for the purpose of really building and celebrating and working and struggling,
Mhm.
you lose parts of what came naturally to you as
Yeah.
a family. So part of what we do is um, we gather children together in elementary through high school, and we call them scholars because we see them as, to use the words of Baba Chike Akua, students seeking to be scholars. And we're holding space to be unapologetically Black, to be
Mhm.
unapologetic about celebrating our history. Sometimes I do pay attention to the news, but I also live in a bubble that we've created for ourselves. And part of being a marooner, as Mark is saying, is the idea of purposefully taking time to separate and build the things that we need to build in order to create those senses of purpose, of dignity, of future building within the minds of our community. So I love what you were saying in terms of how it was when you were a child, and I believe that's what we're doing in the Village Method is giving space to not only talk about what was, but also to think
Mhm.
about what needs to be
Mhm.
as we're in this moment and what we need to build as we go forward, but together.
together,
Yeah, and
underlining
go
that together The spaces that we create are spaces where we're bridging the gap between the kitchen table and the classroom, right?
Mhm.
It's not, we don't just focus on serving youth, but the secret sauce of our work has always been coming from the church: family outreach and engagement, family
Mhm.
involvement, parent
Mhm.
involvement,
Right.
finding ways to say, how do we fill up a full auditorium full of parents when the school says it's not possible, we've never been able to do it. And we've been able
Mhm.
to do it year over year over year in filling up the rooms. And then what happens when we get those same parents to start getting curious and saying, well, what is happening in the school?
Right.
Who is my principal? What is the school
Mhm.
site council? How are
Mhm.
decisions made? The budget
Mhm.
this year is what? How
Mhm.
much of that is going towards programs that serve our children?
Right.
And that is one of the keys in the work that we're doing. And so we like to say that we are really a parent power building and advocacy program that just happens to also offer after school enrichment programming.
I think that is a great way to put that. I'm going to actually put it up on the screen here. Um, I do a lot of work, and like I said, in my professional life, I do a lot of work around teacher advocacy, so teachers can understand their rights. I do a lot of work with parent advocacy, in terms of, like you said, understanding what is available for parents. What are parents' rights?
Mhm.
Because sometimes parents don't know their rights, especially within the public school system. It's not openly expressed to them, right? Most parents typically get a handbook at the beginning of the school year, or they get a slip saying, sign this that you agree to the handbook. And they may not have read it for whatever reason, various reasons, but understanding parents need to understand what their rights are.
Exactly.
Children need to understand what their rights are
Yes.
inside of the school system. You have a right to a quality education. And when you see that not happening, you have a right as the child and the parent to push back against what you see occurring. It's not, well, that's just the way things are. No, that isn't just the way
Mhm.
things are. You have a right to demand more. So I think that's a great way to put that: parent power building and advocacy program. The next thing I want to ask you about, as we're talking about parents, we're sort of leading into our next question I have for you. How can parents close the gap when it comes to teaching and protecting against disinformation and misinformation? Because we know right now, especially, for
Mm.
example, with states like Florida, they are cutting some of the curriculum, or they are literally changing the facts inside of the curriculum. So, how can parents close the gap practically when it comes to teaching and protecting against this disinformation that children are going to be confronted with?
Mhm. Well, I would say as a parent, one is definitely read everything that comes across your email inbox. And it's a lot of stuff. We have 3 children, high school, middle school, elementary. I read a lot. And with the reading, I would say there, every family has its struggles, whether it be time, resources, um, being able to be present physically, not physically. But what I've found is the more that I stay aware, at least, of what is happening on the campus, the better my questions are.
Mhm.
I would say also as a parent, we've learned to ask our kids questions about their day. What did you see? Mark has a great way of asking our kids, tell me something that you learned today. And they answer that question all kinds of ways and unexpected ways. But I think sometimes the schools, they're building parent groups and advocacy groups of parents. Um, but what I've noticed in that is that sometimes as schools are building parent groups, there's so many more parents who are not involved, not a part of those. So what I say to those families is there's all kinds of ways to be involved. Don't wait on your child's teacher. to do all the things. As a matter of fact, I would enter that relationship hoping for a partnership, but ready for what if it's not. And so this idea of being aware, asking questions, and then seeing how you can get into the classroom. That's something I recommend to families all the time, whether it be the classroom, volunteering at the lunchtime. But after the pandemic, I've noticed that as a parent, it's very hard for me to get insight into what's going on in the school day because schools have changed their regulations on how people can come onto campuses or not come onto campus.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
with that in mind, I've had to get creative about how I can be present. So we need someone to put something up on the door. That's me. Because it's not that I care about the door as much as I want to know what's happening in this school. My child is here. That's my child. And I want to understand what's going on. From there, what I would lastly say is not everybody can do that, though. Everyone has various schedules. It's really been powerful for me to connect with other parents, other like-minded parents. So being connected with other families has helped. And I'm speaking mostly with my parent hat on, but this has informed my work in the Village Method. Building spaces where parents can connect. And if there aren't spaces that you find, make your own. Connect with other families and make sure you have their cell phone number because I can't tell you the amount of times I've had to text another parent, a parent group, just not even for the work, but just something that my child came home saying happened at school. And I needed to get the backstory on that. So staying connected, as we say, building community is a powerful way to make sure that you are staying informed, ask questions, attend school board meetings, attend school site council meetings. And the great thing now is that you don't physically have to go to a room. A lot of these things are recorded. So you can watch the recordings and become abreast of what's going on without having to physically go. And you can even watch it the next day. So these are just some of the ways that I have been able to stay abreast. I know Mark has a lot of other ideas in addition to.
Go
Sure.
ahead, Mr. Gaskin.
Everything that Mahia said, and I would say that our parents, we are in a state of emergency. We have long passed a state of emergency. In the state of Georgia, I want to say all throughout the schools, the average level of achievement and proficiency in English and math for Black children is under 20%. That's Georgia. But it's also the state of California. In the state of California, I think the number is somewhere between 3 and 4 children out of 10 are eligible to even apply to a 4-year college when they graduate from high school. This is in a state that has something called the A to G requirements, meaning that the students are supposed to automatically be given classes that once they graduate high school, they're eligible to apply to a 4-year college. Something's going wrong. We're in a state of emergency. Our children cannot read at college level or do math at college level. They cannot compete. And I would dare say that out of 10 parents who are listening to me right now, your child is probably one of the children that cannot read or do math at a competitive level. I'm just putting it out there. We are in a state of emergency. So what we need to do then is consider our children for what they are. They are our greatest asset, right? They're an investment. When we take our asset and we then give them into the school system, we are investing in the public school system. There is no investment program out there that makes sense for you to then give money and then just walk away and expect nothing in return. Everyone expects a return on their investment. And if you think
Mhm.
you're not paying, I guarantee you through taxes, the school is still getting on the low end $7,000 a year for your child to be in the seat. Some schools in some states, they get $15,000 a year. You
Mhm.
multiply that up from kindergarten through 12th grade, these schools are getting good money. That
Mhm.
teacher is going to get their paycheck, whether they flunk your child or that child gets an A. They're gonna still get paid. So our greatest investment then is our children, and we need to treat it like that, treat them like that. We need to watch and monitor. We need to hold accountable and inspect what we expect. If we expect our children to learn, don't just expect them to do it, but look at what the teaching team is, right? If if an investment management company came to me and said, Mr. Gaskins, if you give us $10,000, we're going to turn it into 1 million in 10 years. I say, really? Let me see your website, right? Who's on your team? Who's your staff?
Mhm.
Right.
What
Mhm.
evidence do you have of success, right? And we all know that if our children did Yelp reviews on the public education system, most of them would say, what is that thing we see on some people? If I could give it 0 stars, I
Mhm.
would, but I'm gonna give it 1. And so anyway, that's the thing. Treat our children as the investments and the assets that they are for our future.
Mhm.
This is how our future is going to be if we don't invest. I'll also say build community. We have been blessed over these last 20 years to be connected with elders. I'm going to give a shout out right now to Baba Wakesa Mazimoyo and his wife, Mama Afia. They have been warriors that have helped us. They have a training on being warrior healers and builders, right?
Mhm.
About how do you teach our children about oppression without causing
Mhm.
depression in our children,
Right.
right?
Right.
So we've had elders like them, and Mahea mentioned Baba Chike Akua also. I mean, we've been able to tap into elders who have poured into us, and we just take what they've written, what they've taught us, and then we distribute that. Build community. Don't be on an island.
Right.
Find
Mhm.
elders, find people of faith, find healers, seers,
Mhm.
those with discernment that you can trust, and make sure your community is equipped with those people. Because if you don't have them, then you're lacking in guarding certain areas, and you have gaps in certain areas that you need to be. Last thing I'll say is, as a parent, you are your child's co-pilot. You are their navigational support system. Any obstacle that you see ahead, do not expect the child to know how to get around or what to do with it. It
Mhm.
will stop and maybe even stunt their academic growth, their spiritual growth, how they see themselves. It will stunt their ability to move ahead and be the return on investment that you hope.
Mhm.
So you are their co-pilot. The school should know your name. The principal should know your name, not because you're the loud one showing up, acting a fool, cussing and everything, but because you will hold them
No.
accountable. And whatever they say, they better have a policy and not a practice to back up what they're trying to do.
Yeah. You guys have really given some insights and some helpful advice for parents. I hope those of you who are listening are sharing this broadcast. I wanted to put up a term that I've sort of coined as to what I see happening in education, and you all did such a beautiful job touching on it, and that is education benign neglect.
Mm.
And I want to talk a little bit about that very quickly before we move to our on to our last questions here. But education benign neglect. Benign neglect is when you allow a community to deteriorate. You don't stop them, but you don't help them. And that's what we see happening when it comes to education. Um, you mentioned the reading rates and the math rates. We've got similar issues here in my state, Maryland, where they have already gone ahead and decided to pull geometry out of math curriculums here in Maryland. So guess what I'm going to be doing? I'm trying to work with some people right now to get a curriculum together where we just teach students geometry who want to learn geometry, since it's going to be pulled out of the curriculum. Why? Because as you said, you're taking out the things that would make our children competitive.
Right.
See, one of the things I try to explain to people when it comes to education is I don't necessarily have to say, I don't want you to do well in life. I just have to make you less competitive.
Mm. Right.
I just have to put you in a school that makes you less competitive.
Yes.
I just have to take away resources that make you less competitive. And so that's what we see happening. And I started to notice this right after we crossed the line in public schools where Black and brown children began to outnumber non-Black and brown children in public schools. And I could tell you the year that was, and that was around 2012, right around the time of the Trayvon Martin case.
Mm-hmm.
That same shift of how that case blew up nationally, we saw a shift in the demographics in public schools.
Mm.
And at that shift, I said to myself, they're going to start pulling out and pulling back resources because they feel like we are benefiting more because more of us are in these systems. And that's literally what we have been seeing over the last, 10 to 12 years, is this slow removal of resources, this slow removal of requirements, this sort of letting things go, not really paying attention even to some of the test score requirements they've had, this social promotion, right? Where the child has failed, they have not met the criteria for their grade level, and they're still being passed on. That's called social promotion, parents, if you did not know. Okay, your child is still being promoted while they know your child does not have the skill set in order to compete in that next grade. And
Right.
so I've I've taught K through 12 various subjects, but my main concentration is reading and math in terms of getting students to grade level or above grade level. So I get a student that's maybe middle school that can only read on the second and third grade level.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because they were socially promoted.
Mm-hmm.
They just
Right.
kept passing them on and passing them on and passing them on. And now here it is, they're about to go to high school and they're still reading on a second and third grade level. That is gross educational benign neglect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You
Well,
have you've handicapped that child um, for their adulthood.
right.
Go
Right.
ahead, Mahia.
Yeah. And I had to look up the word benign because I was like, okay, benign neglect. Let me think deeply on what this means, what she's saying. Um, as a breast cancer survivor, I've learned a lot about how cancerous cells work. And the idea of something being benign, malignant, metastatic, I don't know if I'm pronouncing the word correctly, but anytime we're dealing with a cancerous anything, you need that out your body. So it doesn't belong there. And so you're talking about what happens when we see something and don't do something. And
Mhm,
at the same token, I would say there's another entity that's moving and it's doing a lot, like you were saying, and removing,
mhm,
substituting, putting in
mhm,
false information. And what I've noticed, even in our own children, the more days that go by, the more years that go by, and something is not said or recalled back, they forget. Um,
mhm,
our oldest was born during the time of Obama's presidency. Our other two were born during the time mostly of this other man. And what I've noticed is their perceptions on what's happening in the world is impacted by the amounts of rhetoric that is said during their childhood, right? So our oldest has memory of a different time. Our younger two, not so much. And so whereas one I'm thinking benign, but the other, I'm thinking there is a strong push of a cancerous idea, cancerous ideas, especially living here in the South, where it's not only about what's being removed, but it's about what's not said and allows
Mhm.
things to creep into their minds. Um,
Yep.
and you'll hear evidence of it in things that they refer to or the jokes that they make or
Mhm.
doesn't sound like our family. That sounds like somebody else. Who have you been listening to? And
Mhm.
so the idea of anything cancerous, it must be removed from the body. And then you must think about how to protect yourself from getting
Mhm.
it in if you're successful in removing it. So there's I'm going to say something, and it's, people can take it or leave it. I don't all the way believe that our educational systems can be fixed. And I
Mhm.
do believe somewhat that uh, letting them fall apart as they have in the past couple decades, maybe since the beginning, I don't know. The real reality people are having this awakening. I'm almost glad for it. Because living in a liberal state of California where people say, oh, it must have been really nice to live there, no racism and blah, blah, I would say, no, actually, it was the most racist. And here's why, because when you're not acknowledging that something exists, it's actually harder to me than if someone just waves their flag and says,
Mhm.
you're racist. I do not
Mhm.
want you here. I do not like you. Like, okay,
Yep.
thank you for your honesty. But this idea of something benign, right, where it's there, but it's not really doing anything, but it's not doing anything. And so
Mhm.
it's hard to get momentum in that type of
Mhm.
environment. It's hard to,
Mhm.
even with our own people. It was
Yep.
challenging at times when we began to recognize that there were some who we were serving and the parents who were like,
Mhm.
yeah, no, I believe that we're good.
Mhm.
I just have my child in your program because it looks fun and y'all are doing homework. But for the most part, I'm good. And to me, that was actually just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than one who's raising the banner of "I am a
Mhm.
racist." So
Mhm.
I'm in this space now where I see people awakening, and
Mhm.
I see people feeling like, hey, there's something wrong. And I'm not saying that I'm glad that there's something wrong. What I'm saying is I'm glad that more people are awakening to the fact that
Yes.
something must be done and it cannot go unaddressed. To go
Mhm.
unaddressed is to allow cancer to spread. And
Mhm.
like Mark said, it might already be in your household. Uh,
Right.
so I appreciate what you said, around this term, education benign neglect, and connecting it to our deeper why on why we feel like it's so important that not only do we do this work, but that we share this work with others.
Yes. And the key word in there is benign because it looks harmless.
Right.
It's done in such a way that it is a bloodless neglect. You don't see the wounds until it's too late. You
Mhm.
don't see the decay and the deterioration until it's too late. Or you see it decades later in
Right.
terms of if we think about benign neglect with our communities, what damage did building highways through our communities do? Well, it broke up Black towns.
Mm-hmm.
It destroyed Black economic epicenters in most towns. I'm
Mm-hmm.
from South Florida, so I can talk about Miami and Overtown and all of that. But
Mm-hmm.
that's what it did. People thought, oh, this is a good thing. But
Right.
no, it wiped out Black communities
Right.
to build that. And so thank you for sharing your further insight. Tell us a little bit about your current project that you have going on.
Mm-hmm.
Goodness, current project. So we've been operating in the West Coast, so in California, for the larger part of our years. We've now expanded our work and our reach into areas like Chicago, as well as, of course, Atlanta. And so expanding this work does require investment, right? It requires some financial support, especially in a time when the government is saying, well, any organization that is Black led should have an asterisk on it already, right? Maybe they don't get the funding. We're seeing around the country, some funders are pouring in. They're really leaning in and saying, we're going to give more investment, and we love them. We appreciate and value them. And there's other funders who are being compliant proactively and saying, you know what, we're going to erase anything that has to do with diversity or equity and inclusion or culturally responsive or socially emotional. We're getting rid of all that language and just going to go ahead and white it out. And so our work, we believe that the Village Method is the kind of program that parents, we're two parents. When we started this as parents. And we believe that there are other parents who are in this awakening. They are realizing that something is wrong, something is going on. What can I do? We see so many more parents that are taking their children out of schools and pushing into more of the homeschool or micro school environment, right? And we applaud them for their courage in doing that, right? We're also seeing that more communities are protesting. And I don't know when's the last time I've been in Target or a Walmart, right? I mean, we're coming awake to say that, well, our investment dollars, we have power in this, right? But the question is then, what are we going to do about the school to poverty and prison pipeline, right? What are we going to do about this thing that we are still, by default, kind of low key investing in? How do we then channel our power? How do we channel our dollars into the programs that are doing the work of building community that we know we need for our children?
Right.
And so that's kind of a long-winded way to say that we're looking to expand our work. We're looking also to open up an opportunity with investors who believe that this work can support other families, other parents who want to replicate this throughout the country. And then, of course, we want to teach this work through professional development and work with educators who believe that I can't do this on my own in the classroom. I need the partnership with an organization like the Village Method to help build out the community development that I need to strengthen the work that I'm doing in the classroom.
Awesome. And I want to encourage people today, as we have been talking and sharing, I know that the Village Method has made the case to be supported. So we have dropped the link inside of our chat, as well as the link is also at the top here. You can take a visit to their website and donate today. I'm going to encourage you to do that. Make a donation today to the work that Mark and Mahia are doing. Um, I have really, really enjoyed having this conversation because it is so needed. I am a global remote educator, so I educate students in the individual one-to-one as well as small group. I work with parents, individual one-to-one. Um, I do small group. I do one-to-one coaching. I do workshops for parents for schools. I write curriculum for the state. And so I've got a hand in a lot of that
Okay.
because, like you said, there's not enough being done. And so my thing is, it's all hands on deck,
All hands on deck.
using your gifts, using your skills in whatever way, shape possible that you can do it. I work with parents who do micro schools. I work with parents who homeschool. And so that has been my experience. Like I said, I have 25 years in education. The last 4 of my years, I have been doing global remote education because literally there's not enough to go around,
Mhm.
literally. So I
Mhm.
said, I've got to step out of a physical space
Yeah.
and get more into the remote space so that I can help more students and I can help more parents. So that has been my primary goal the past 4 years, from
Well,
students in the United States but also students outside of the United States. I have students in Canada, I have students in the UK. So
Mhm.
I get a better, it helps me to get a better snapshot
Right.
of what's happening in education, not just in the United States, but also in other countries,
We
right?
need you. We need your voice. If no one has told you this week or recently, thank you for what you're doing, you know, and creating this platform and speaking out. Because before we went into the pandemic, the idea of homeschooling, microschooling, it felt big, like very
Mhm,
big and overwhelming. But
mhm.
teachers like you were who helped Mark and I as we became homeschoolers to not to know that not only did we have a village in person, but we had a village through the internet. And being
Yes.
able to connect with teachers like you really helped our sanity. I'll speak specifically my sanity. So thank you for, you know, the things that you're doing to spread the word, to spread this good word that it is possible. And when we focus on what is possible and we keep our eyes
Mhm.
on that prize, I believe that we can achieve what we set out to do.
And one thing I will say, and this is advice that I give to any parent that I am working with, whether their child is in the public school or whether their child they're considering homeschooling or microschooling, I tell them this: look, when we went through our process as educators, we were told in no uncertain terms through practice and theory that the public school model is built for the normative child.
Mm,
It is normative education, it is normative intelligence, it is centered around the what they call the normative IQ. And
Mm,
so if your child sits outside of the norm on either side of the spectrum, so whether that's outside of the norm leaning to gifted or outside of the norm leaning to needing more supports around their education, right? So from independence to needing more dependence on outside sources, your child is going to struggle.
yeah.
mm. I would add the socially and culturally conscious child as well. They're going to
Yes,
struggle
yes,
because
yes.
that norm is also pushing for a child to really sequester and push down
Mm-hmm.
what parents like Mark and myself, and probably you, aunties and uncles, grandparents, are saying to them, and then having
Mm-hmm.
to go into a space and shrink in order to try to
Yes,
fit in. So there's
yes.
all types of, I would almost, as you said, left to right. I think I've always saw it left to right, but I just in this moment saw it almost like a 3D shape because
Mm-hmm.
there's
Mm,
all types of other
Yes.
other spaces that our children fit in addition to
Mm-hmm.
that. Mhm.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
so if your child is neurotypical, they'll do well in a public school setting
right.
because that is what it's designed for. If your child is not neurotypical, you're going to want to supply them with some supports
Yeah.
because you can have gifted students that are suppressed
Mhm.
that fall into maladaptive behaviors
mm,
because they're not being challenged, or you can have students that need a great deal of supports that fall into maladaptive behaviors because they don't have those additional supports.
Right.
And so that has sort of helped some parents to understand a little bit better about why they might need to be more involved, especially if your child sits outside of the typical.
Right.
So just know that and be prepared to, like you said, and we've been saying throughout this broadcast, be prepared to be your child's advocates.
Yeah.
mhm,
Be prepared to be your child's advocate. Get in touch with thevillagemethod.org so that you can get some training. Donate to thevillagemethod.org because they are doing the work. And we want to support people who are doing the work, who are walking the walk and talking the talk. Final thoughts, as we like to say here. And my normal co-host, Pastor Ben, is on. He's probably laughing because we usually close about 3 times before we actually close in the good old tradition of faith here. But I want to allow you both to give your final thoughts, your advice to parents as we close out today.
Well, I would say, first of all, speak into yourself and tell yourself, good job. Parenting is hard, and there is no playbook. I would say seek community. You're not alone, but sometimes it can feel like we're alone when we're dealing with big challenges. Community is healing. And the community doesn't have to be 100 people, it could be 2 or 3. So find community. Um, and then know, like we just said, our children are depending on us. And it's not just our children, but it's the children of our children's children who are depending on us, just as we depend on our ancestors that came before us, who paved ways. And we can do this. It is hard, but it's not impossible. I've learned hard is not the same thing as impossible. So
Mhm.
I would say that parents, we are the first teachers of our children, and therefore the school does not know your child better than you do. You love your child, and so protect your child from any hurt, harm, and danger that the public school system may intentionally or unintentionally put on your child. You are the first teacher. You taught them how to walk, how to use words and talk, how to fall and get back up. That's you. You did that. You made that major accomplishment. In an elementary school, they're going to have you. Maybe they'll draw you in on the elementary level. They'll draw you in. Don't stop in middle school.
mm,
Lean in more. That's really when our children become strange.
mhm.
All hormones and all that other stuff kicks in, and you want to kind of push them off. Do the opposite. Get them involved in things. Get them, even if you got to take them to a good community that you're aware of, know that community, connect with them, and drop your child off somewhere where they're going to get cultivated spiritually, mentally, physically. But they have to learn these things. And we do too as parents,
Yeah.
right? And definitely in high school, that's when you want to almost lock arms with your scholar and be with them all the way through, because that's the 4-year investment that you are doing to make sure that they're eligible for the next wave of life in their journey. And so yeah, everything that Mahia said, and just that we love our children, and they are our investment. So I love your children, and I love the fact that you have allowed yourself to be blessed with the greatest gift that we could have, which is life and future. So invest in that life, pour into that life, and know that if you come across the village method, we'll do the same in any way we possibly can. Asha.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. You guys have just made my heart just soar today. My heart is just so full right now. Um, you mentioned middle school, and I say this in a very joking fashion. People say, "Well, what's your favorite uh, age and grade level?" I don't really have a favorite, but I deeply understand the middle school child.
Yes, me too. I love middle school. And people
Some,
say you're strange. That's weird. And I say, no, middle school is funny. They have humor. They're still sweet and salty. Um,
uh-huh.
they're bittersweet. I love dark bittersweet chocolate. That's my favorite.
Me too.
So yeah.
And I often say when I was in the classroom space, I said you have to recognize this about middle school.
Mm-hmm.
Middle school children are some days they're 3
Yep.
and some days they're 30.
Mm-hmm.
So once you figure that out, you can just ask them, which age are you today? Are you 3 or are you 30? And then that helps me to sort of navigate the kind of support that they might need for the day.
I'm gonna use
Because
that one.
sometimes they want to be 3 and I've got to respond to the 3-year-old in them. And then sometimes they want to be 30, which means they see themselves as the adult already, and
Mm-hmm.
I've got to respond to that part of them. So that's what helps me with the middle schooler. So parents, if you're dealing with a middle schooler, just remember 3 or 30. That's
Love
what
that.
you're dealing with every day, 3 or 30.
Yeah.
Sometimes they need more nourishing. Sometimes they want you to see eye to eye with them, but the middle is somewhere in there. In other words, the middle school child never wants to be quite in the middle
Mm,
Mm.
because it's that developmental stage. So
Mm.
sometimes they want to revert back to relying on the parental support. Sometimes they want to stand on their own.
And middle school really does benefit from like auntie uncle energy. So if
Yes.
like anyone wants to be auntie to our middle schooler, I love being auntie to other people's middle schooler. But when they're in your own house, it's different. I'll just say that in honesty.
Awesome.
But I love the middle schooler, so I connect with you on that.
Well, I want to thank you all for your time today. Getting Mr. and Ms. Gaskins, you all have been fantastic. Thank you all for sharing about your program and the supports that are out here that are available. We encourage you today to check out their website, donate to the work. This work is important, and I often like to say that this is legacy work.
Mm,
This is the work where we are the elders planting the seed. We
mm,
may not be here to see the oak grow, but we're planting the seeds. And so I encourage you to plant seeds today, donate to the programs, get involved, reach out and contact Mark and Mahia. And we thank you again for your time and attention. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host today, Shantae Charles. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So continue to go out and be light. Take care, be well, and most importantly, be light. Mr. and Mrs. Gaskins, if you all can hang back after our stream is over. Thank you.